A grand mansion's study room filled with well-dressed relatives seated around a polished oak table. The tension is thick as the family lawyer opens a folder labeled Last Will and Testament. When the wealthy patriarch of the Harrison family passed away, everyone came. The sons, the daughters, the grandchildren, everyone except the one person they thought didn't matter. But when her name was finally called, every jaw in the room dropped. A young woman in a modest dress sitting quietly at the back of the room. Anna, the family's forgotten niece, watching as the others laugh and whisper about her. They never knew that the one they ignored was the one he loved the most. The morning of the will reading began like any other grey, solemn day after a funeral. Heavy clouds hung low over the sprawling Harrison estate, and the grand iron gates creaked open only for those invited. Expensive cars lined the cobblestone driveway, polished sedans, luxury SUVs, and a black limousine gleaming under the pale sunlight. It was the kind of gathering where grief took a back seat to greed. Inside the mansion's grand hall, the marble floors were spotless, and the scent of lilies, Charles Harrison's favorite flowers, lingered faintly in the air. The wealthy patriarch had been gone only a week, but his relatives had already begun circling like hawks, their smiles painted and their condolences rehearsed. At the far end of the room stood a young woman in a simple beige dress, her hair neatly tied back, her hands folded nervously before her. Anna Harrison, 25 years old, the late billionaire's niece, or as the family often called her, the charity case. Anna had been taken in by her uncle after her parents' tragic car accident 15 years ago. At the time, she was just a frightened 10-year-old girl with nothing but a small suitcase and a broken heart. Charles had treated her like a daughter, providing her a home, an education, and something even more valuable, kindness. But the rest of the Harrison family never accepted her. Whenever there were family gatherings or parties, Anna was the one who served the drinks, arranged the flowers, and stayed in the background. Her cousins would whisper cruel things when they thought she couldn't. Here, she's not really family. Uncle just took her in to ease his conscience. She's lucky to even breathe our air, and she learned, over the years, to stay silent, to endure. The family lawyer, Mr. Langford, was scheduled to arrive at noon. By 11:30, the other heirs had already gathered in the study, an elegant wood-paneled room filled with portraits of stern ancestors and old leather-bound books. The ticking of an antique clock echoed through the silence as each family member pretended to be patient. Anna stood quietly by the doorway, uncertain if she should even be there. She'd received a formal invitation from the lawyer, but the way her cousins looked at her made it clear they thought it was a mistake. "Why are you here, Anna?" sneered Edward Harrison, the eldest son, adjusting his gold cufflinks. "This isn't a tea party. The will reading is for family." Anna lowered her eyes. "I was invited," she said softly. "Invited," Monica, his younger sister, repeated with a cruel laugh. "How sweet. Maybe Uncle left you a thank you card for dusting his books." Their cousin Victor, lounging on a velvet chair, smirked. "Or maybe a mop. She can keep cleaning the mansion for us after we move in." The room erupted in laughter. Anna said nothing. She simply took a seat in the corner, folding her hands in her lap, staring down at the polished floor. She had loved her uncle deeply. During his final months, when illness had kept him bedridden, she had been the one to bring him his medicine, read to him, and listen to his stories about the early days when he had nothing but dreams. He would often hold her hand and say, "Anna, people show their true faces when money is on the table. Never envy them, pity them." And now, those words echoed in her mind like a whisper from beyond the grave. At precisely noon, the door opened and Mr. Langford, the lawyer, entered carrying a thick folder and an air of solemnity. The room fell silent. He greeted the family courteously, adjusted his glasses, and sat at the large mahogany table. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "we are gathered today to execute the final will and testament of the late Mr. Charles Harrison. May his memory be honored." There were a few mumbled amens, though none sounded genuine. Mr. Langford opened the folder and began reading. To my beloved son, Edward Harrison, I leave the vineyard in Tuscany and the accompanying estate." Edward smirked proudly, shooting a glance at Anna as if to say, "See?" "To my daughter, Monica Harrison, I leave the New York penthouse and the art collection within." Monica gasped dramatically, clutching her chest. "Oh, Daddy always said I had an eye for beauty," she exclaimed, ignoring the glares of others. Mr. Langford continued, "To my grandson, Victor Harrison, I leave the yacht Endeavour and the Mediterranean property." Victor leaned back, grinning. "Guess summer's sorted." The room buzzed with satisfied murmurs. They were already calculating values, imagining how they would spend the inheritance. Then Mr. Langford paused. His tone changed slightly, quieter, heavier. And lastly, he said, "To my niece Anna Harrison." Every head turned. Edward's grin froze. Monica's jaw dropped. Victor raised an eyebrow. Mr. Langford continued reading. "To my niece Anna Harrison, the one who stood by me when no one else did, I leave everything else that I own. This includes all remaining assets, properties, and holdings under the Harrison Family Trust. She alone shall have full ownership of the Harrison estate and its accounts." The room went completely silent. For a moment, even the clock seemed to stop ticking. Then came the explosion. "What?" Edward shot to his feet, his face red. "This must be a mistake." "Everything else? What does that even mean?" "It means," said the lawyer calmly, "that Miss Anna Harrison is now the sole heir to your father's remaining estate. That includes his controlling shares in Harrison Global Enterprises, as well as the family mansion." Monica's voice trembled. No, that can't be right. She's not even blood. She's nothing." Anna sat frozen in her chair, eyes wide, unable to process the words. She whispered. "That can't be." "Uncle Charles wouldn't," Mr. Langford interrupted gently. "He wrote this will by hand, Miss Harrison. He was of sound mind. There is no doubt of his intent." Edward stormed toward the lawyer, slamming his hands on the table. "You're lying!" She must have manipulated him. He was sick. She was alone with him for months. "Mr. Harrison," said Langford firmly, "I understand your emotions, but your father's will was witnessed and notarized. It is legally binding." Victor rose from his seat, pointing at Anna. "You did this. You tricked him." Tears welled in Anna's eyes. "No," she said quietly. "I never asked for anything." But her words were drowned by shouting. Edward cursed under his breath. Monica broke into sobs, clutching her pearls. One cousin muttered something about contesting the will. Mr. Langford cleared his throat and continued professionally, though his voice was slightly strained. "There is one final note attached," he said. "Mr. Harrison requested that it be read aloud." He unfolded a single sheet of paper, the familiar handwriting instantly recognizable to Anna. "To my family, I have watched your lives revolve around my wealth, your love weighed in dollars and gifts. But love cannot be purchased. It must be earned through kindness, loyalty, and presence. Only one among you showed me that truth. Anna, my dear girl, you gave without asking. You cared when others waited for me to die. Therefore, everything I leave behind is yours. Use it not for revenge, but for good. Charles Harrison." When the lawyer finished reading, the only sound was Monica's muffled sobs and the soft tick of the clock. Anna's tears finally fell, silent, steady tears of disbelief and gratitude. She looked at her uncle's portrait on the wall, the man with the kind eyes and warm smile, and whispered under her breath, "Thank you." Edward grabbed his coat and stormed toward the door, muttering curses. Monica followed, shaking her head in outrage. Victor lingered just long enough to glare at Anna before leaving too. Within minutes, the room emptied, except for Anna and Mr. Langford. He closed the folder, turned to her, and gave a small, knowing smile. "He was very proud of you, Miss Harrison. He said you reminded him of himself before the money." Anna stood slowly, still dazed. I don't know what to do." "You'll know," the lawyer said kindly. "He trusted you with more than his fortune. He trusted you with his legacy." As she walked out of the study, the sunlight from the tall windows fell across her face, warm and golden. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel invisible. She felt seen and somewhere she could almost hear her uncle's voice again. Never envy them. Anna, pity them. The moment Anna stepped out of the study, the atmosphere inside the Harrison mansion had shifted entirely. Where there had once been smug satisfaction and whispered plotting, there was now confusion, disbelief, and anger. The older family members exchanged frantic glances, their carefully constructed facades of civility beginning to crumble. Edward Harrison, the eldest son, slammed the grand oak door behind him. His face was crimson, veins bulging on his temple as he muttered curses under his breath. Monica, his younger sister, collapsed into a nearby velvet armchair, burying her face in her hands, stifling both sobs and screams. Victor, the spoiled grandson who had been so certain of his inheritance, paced back and forth, fists clenched, muttering that this would be settled in court. But Anna, she remained standing at the threshold, the lawyer's words echoing in her mind. She could hear their accusations, their disbelief, and even their whispered threats, but she did not flinch. For the first time in her life, she was not afraid of them. She was not invisible. She had been chosen for a reason, and she finally understood what that reason was. The first wave of outrage came swiftly. Within hours, Edward had contacted a high-powered law firm, certain that a will reading could be challenged, especially one that defied their expectations. Monica immediately began calling friends and distant relatives, hoping for sympathy and perhaps a way to undermine Anna's claim. Victor had already taken to social media, posting vague hints and hashtags about injustice and manipulation. News crews arrived by the evening, drawn to the mansion after whispers of a billionaire's unexpected heir spread like wildfire. Flashbulbs popped in the carefully manicured gardens, reporters shouting questions, microphones thrust toward the now famous forgotten niece. Headlines began appearing online within minutes. Billionaire leaves fortune to niece. Family furious, and Harrison family scandal, unexpected heir stuns relatives. Through it all, Anna remained calm. She did not speak to the cameras beyond the polite acknowledgement of her presence. She did not argue with the shouting reporters or the invasive lenses. She simply stood tall, her gaze steady, and her hands clasped in front of her. She had never sought wealth, never craved attention, and now she did not intend to let anger or envy dictate her life. It was then, amidst the chaos, that the first flashback appeared in Anna's mind. Sharp and vivid, she saw herself as a small girl, no more than 10 years old, clutching a small suitcase in the middle of a rainy street after the tragic accident that had taken her parents. She had nowhere to go, no one to turn to, until a gentle hand reached out, the hand of her Uncle Charles. "You're coming home with me," he had said softly, brushing wet strands of hair from her face. "You'll never be alone again." She remembered how he had wrapped her in a warm coat, taken her to his modest apartment at the time, and patiently coaxed her through her tears and fear. Over the years, he had ensured she received the best education he could provide, always reminding her, character is measured not by wealth, but by how you treat others when no one is watching. Those lessons had remained with Anna, guiding her through years of being ridiculed, overlooked, and underestimated by the very family she had been born into. Another flashback took her to the final months of Charles Harrison's life. When illness had confined him to his bedroom, Anna had been there every day, gently feeding him, reading aloud from his favorite books, and holding his hand as he drifted into sleep. She remembered sitting at his bedside late one night, the soft glow of a lamp illuminating the lines of his face, as he whispered, "Anna, people will show their true colors when they think wealth is involved. Don't let their greed hurt you. Always give without expecting, and love without condition." These memories surged through her mind now as she watched her cousin's fury play out. They had spent their lives chasing her uncle's fortune, treating him as if he were merely a bank, yet it was Anna, the quiet, selfless one, who had earned his ultimate trust. Meanwhile, Edward's legal team was already preparing documents claiming undue influence. He insisted that Anna had manipulated Charles during his illness to secure the inheritance. Monica's friends began whispering about possible scandal, attempting to tarnish Anna's reputation before it even began. Victor, frustrated and bitter, began spreading rumors online, suggesting that Anna had exploited her uncle's kindness. The media frenzy intensified as reporters arrived outside the Harrison estate. Cameras focused on the mansion's tall windows, attempting to catch a glimpse of the new heiress. Some speculated that Anna would squander the fortune, others that she would sell the estate immediately. Every headline emphasized the shocking twist, the unexpected heir, and the outraged family. But Anna did not care about headlines. She did not care about gossip or accusations. All she cared about was honoring the man who had shown her love when no one else would. She remembered his final letter, his instructions to use the wealth wisely, not for revenge, but for good. One particular memory stood out vividly. Charles Harrison, sitting at his antique desk late one night, pen in hand. He wrote carefully, deliberately, aware that these words would outlast him. Anna, my dear girl, you have shown me that love cannot be measured in dollars, nor loyalty in titles. You have cared when others have only sought to benefit from my wealth. My estate, everything I leave behind, is yours. Use it not for vengeance, but to create goodness in the world. Remember, character is greater than fortune. Anna remembered reading those words after his passing, feeling a warmth in her chest that no wealth could replicate. She had cried quietly, understanding that her uncle had always believed in her, even when the world, including her own family, had not. As the hours passed, Anna began to understand the full scope of what her uncle had entrusted to her. It was more than money. It was responsibility, legacy, and moral authority. The chaotic anger of her relatives, the prying eyes of the media, and the endless speculation, none of it could shake her. She had been chosen not because she was clever or manipulative or entitled, but because she had been genuinely selfless, loyal, and compassionate. The flashbacks continued to play in her mind, showing her small acts of kindness over the years, holding her uncle's hand during late-night walks in the hospital, listening patiently to his stories about building his empire, and quietly standing up for him when others were rude or dismissive. Each memory reinforced one undeniable truth. She had been the only family member who had truly loved Charles Harrison without expectation. By the end of the day, the Harrison mansion had quieted down. Edward had left in a storm of anger. Monica sulked in her room, and Victor had retreated to his own house, fuming over what he considered a humiliation. The media had broadcasted the shocking revelation live, splashed across social media and news websites by evening. Anna, however, walked through the mansion with a calm, almost serene presence. Her mind was focused, not on the fortune, not on the scandal, but on fulfilling her uncle's final wish. She would honor him. She would take the inheritance and transform it into something meaningful. For the first time in her life, Anna felt an empowering shift from the overlooked, ignored niece to the rightful inheritor of her uncle's empire. And this was just the beginning. The story of her inheritance, the outrage of her family, and the revelation of why she had been chosen were far from over. But Anna now understood the most important lesson of all. True wealth is not measured in money, but in the depth of love, loyalty, and integrity one leaves behind. The following weeks were a whirlwind of paperwork, media attention, and emotional reckoning. The Harrison estate, a sprawling mansion with its manicured gardens, luxury vehicles, and priceless artwork, was now in Anna's name. She had never imagined herself in such a position, not for wealth, not for status, but because of a simple, quiet love she had shown her uncle over the years. The first few days were difficult. Lawyers, accountants, and trustees swarmed around her, presenting documents that outlined the vast empire she now controlled. Shares, properties, trusts, and investment accounts, numbers so large they seemed unreal. She took a deep breath and reminded herself of her uncle's words. Use this, not for revenge, but for good. While Anna focused on understanding the estate, her relatives were consumed by anger and disbelief. Edward had launched a legal challenge, convinced that she had manipulated Charles in his final months. Monica had hired public relations consultants, attempting to smear Anna in the press. Victor had begun spreading online rumors and orchestrating viral campaigns, accusing Anna of exploiting her uncle. But Anna remained unshaken. She did not respond to their provocations or engage in petty arguments. Instead, she quietly began planning the first steps of her transformation, a way to honor her uncle and create something meaningful out of the fortune he had entrusted to her. The first initiative she undertook was establishing the Charles Harrison Foundation, a philanthropic organization aimed at helping orphans, underprivileged students, and struggling families. The mission was simple: give opportunities to those who had been overlooked or ignored, just as she had been as a child. Anna hired a team of professionals who shared her vision, including some of the old staff from the Harrison estate, housekeepers, groundskeepers, and administrative assistants who had served the family loyally for decades but were often underappreciated. She ensured they were properly compensated, offered training, and gave them a voice in the foundation's operations. One of her first projects involved providing scholarships for students from low-income backgrounds. Anna visited schools personally, listening to the stories of children who had been told they would never achieve their dreams. She met students who reminded her of herself at 10 years old, uncertain, overlooked but brimming with potential. She spoke to them gently, offering guidance, encouragement, and resources. "It doesn't matter where you start," she told one shy teenager. "What matters is where you choose to go." Her actions quickly drew the attention of the media. News outlets covered the story of the former overlooked niece, who was now transforming her uncle's empire into a force for good. Social media buzzed with admiration, and hashtags like Yak Harrison Foundation and Anna Harrison Hero began trending. The public was captivated by the stark contrast between Anna's humility and her relatives' greed. Meanwhile, her family's attempts to undermine her only worsened their reputations. Edward's legal challenge failed spectacularly. The court confirmed the will was valid, executed according to Charles Harrison's intentions. Monica's smear campaign backfired, drawing public criticism for its cruelty and entitlement. Victor's online attacks were met with widespread condemnation, as netizens praised Anna for her grace under pressure. With each passing day, the world watched as Anna not only managed the vast Harrison estate with integrity, but also amplified her uncle's legacy through tangible acts of compassion. Anna also took personal steps to honor the memory of Charles Harrison in ways beyond the foundation. She meticulously catalogued his private letters, notes, and journals, preserving his philosophy and life lessons for future generations. She converted part of the mansion into a small museum dedicated to his life, not merely his wealth, but his values, work ethic, and charitable endeavors. Visitors could walk through rooms filled with photographs, personal artifacts, and inscriptions of his most meaningful quotes. True wealth is not measured by what you have, but by what you give. This quote, displayed prominently in the museum, became Anna's guiding principle. It was a mantra she shared in speeches, interviews, and private conversations, reminding everyone that generosity and humility were far more enduring than gold or property. As Anna's life transformed, so too did the dynamics with her relatives. Edward's business ventures began to falter without the influence of the family name he had once taken for granted. Monica found herself isolated, unable to leverage her social connections now that the media and public opinion had sided overwhelmingly with Anna. Victor, frustrated and humiliated, struggled to maintain credibility in the business world after his attacks on Anna backfired. One by one, they came to realize that money alone could not command respect or admiration. Anna, once ignored and belittled, had become a symbol of integrity, courage, and quiet strength, an unshakable force born not of entitlement, but of empathy and action. Throughout this period, Anna maintained her humility. She continued her daily routines, occasionally performing small acts of kindness unnoticed by the public eye, paying off a struggling family's rent anonymously, delivering supplies to a community center, or personally mentoring students at her foundation. Her life, though dramatically changed in status, remained grounded in the values her uncle had instilled in her. During quiet moments, she would visit Charles Harrison's grave. She would sit by the headstone, sometimes in tears, sometimes in laughter as she recalled his gentle humor. "You always believed in me when no one else did," she whispered one evening, the sun setting behind the gravestones. "I hope I've made you proud." At those times, Anna felt the profound weight of her inheritance, not just in wealth, but in responsibility and moral purpose. Her uncle had entrusted her with a fortune, yes, but also with his vision of a better world, one where overlooked individuals could be empowered to succeed. Months later, the Charles Harrison Foundation had become a benchmark for ethical philanthropy. Anna expanded programs to support women in business, provide microloans to small entrepreneurs, and create mentorship networks for marginalized communities. Each success story reinforced the truth that her uncle had seen, that Anna possessed the qualities that money could never buy: wisdom, empathy, courage, and the ability to inspire others. Through it all, she never sought revenge. She never gloated to her family or flaunted her status. The world knew her story, but Anna lived it with quiet dignity. When relatives attempted to re-enter her life, it was on her terms. She forgave, but she did not forget. She maintained boundaries, ensuring that her wealth was used to build, not enable selfishness. In interviews, she often credited her uncle for the lessons he had taught her, emphasizing that the fortune itself was secondary to the principles of compassion, loyalty, and selflessness. Public admiration for Anna grew, not just because of her inheritance, but because she used it to make a real difference in people's lives. By the end of the year, the Harrison family estate had been fully transformed. The mansion, once a symbol of wealth hoarded and privilege claimed, had become a hub of philanthropy, education, and opportunity. Anna's relatives, humbled and reflective, began to understand that true legacy was not built on greed or entitlement, but on love, integrity, and selfless action. Anna walked through the estate one evening, the gardens glowing softly under lantern light. She paused by a bench overlooking a fountain, breathing in the scent of the flowers her uncle had loved so dearly. She felt a sense of fulfillment she had never known, a connection to the man who had believed in her when no one else had. "You were right, Uncle," she whispered softly. "It isn't about wealth. It's about what we do with it, and who we become because of it." And with that, she smiled, knowing she was living the life he had envisioned, a life that honored not just his fortune, but his heart. The storm of anger and confusion within the Harrison mansion had begun to settle, but the tension lingered like a stubborn fog. Anna had returned to the study, now empty, except for the faint scent of lilies and polished wood that seemed to hold the echoes of her uncle's presence. The sunlight streamed in through tall windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, a golden haze that felt almost sacred. Mr. Langford, the family lawyer, had remained behind, carefully organizing the documents. In his hands was a small, sealed envelope, its paper thick and embossed with Charles Harrison's personal crest. Anna's heart skipped a beat as she saw it. She recognized the handwriting immediately. Elegant, deliberate, each letter a reflection of the man who had been her guardian, mentor, and father figure. "This," Mr. Langford said softly, handing her the envelope, "is a final letter from your uncle. He requested it be given to you after the will reading." Anna's hands trembled slightly as she took the envelope. Her eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow, but of anticipation and love. She had known her uncle intimately, yet the thought that he had left her one final personal message made her chest tighten. She slowly broke the seal and unfolded the paper, revealing words that seemed to glow on the page. "Anna, my dear girl, you have shown me that love cannot be bought, nor loyalty measured in gifts. You were the one who stood by me when no one else would. You brought joy to my last days, comfort to my nights of illness, and courage to my heart. I leave you my estate, not because of wealth or inheritance, but because you have proven that character is the greatest fortune one can possess. Use this inheritance wisely. Use it to uplift others, to change lives, to be a beacon of kindness in a world that often forgets the power of love and selflessness. Always remember, the greatest gift you can give is your heart." To Charles Harrison. For a moment the words were almost too much to bear. Anna sank into the nearest chair, clutching the letter as if holding her uncle himself. Tears streamed down her face, hot and unrelenting. She felt his presence, as though he were sitting beside her, smiling gently and nodding in approval. "He always believed in me," she whispered, her voice trembling. Even when no one else did, the depth of emotion was overwhelming. Anna's entire life had been a series of struggles, small victories, and quiet endurance. She had always been overlooked, dismissed, or ridiculed by the very family who shared her blood. Yet here, in this moment, she understood the true magnitude of her uncle's love and foresight. He had not left her wealth merely as a reward. He had entrusted her with his values, his legacy, and his belief in her innate goodness. As Anna reread the letter, memories came flooding back in vivid detail. She remembered sitting by Charles's bedside during the long nights of his illness, reading aloud stories and letters from the past. She recalled holding his hand while doctors discussed grim prognoses, reassuring him with soft words and gentle smiles. She remembered the quiet afternoons when he would tell her about his early life, the hardships, the failures, and the dreams that had fueled his rise to greatness. It was in those quiet moments that Anna had learned the lessons that no school or lecture could teach: patience, humility, integrity, and the enduring power of kindness. Those lessons had shaped her entire life, and now, as she held her uncle's final words in her hands, she understood that they were the true inheritance, far more valuable than any mansion, bank account, or stock certificate. Mr. Langford watched silently, understanding the gravity of the moment. He had seen many wills executed, many heirs receiving wealth, but rarely had he witnessed such a profound, heartfelt connection between the deceased and the beneficiary. "You were the one he trusted," he said softly. "He believed in you when no one else did. That is why everything is yours." Anna nodded, unable to speak. Her mind was awash with a mixture of gratitude, love, and responsibility. This inheritance was not just an opportunity. It was a mission, a chance to honor the man who had shaped her life with compassion and wisdom. "I will make him proud," she whispered. "I promise I will not waste this." The room felt almost sacred as Anna folded the letter and placed it carefully in her pocket. Every fiber of her being seemed to hum with the weight and significance of her new role. She walked to the window and looked out over the estate, seeing it not merely as a symbol of wealth, but as a canvas upon which she could create meaningful change. In that moment, she envisioned the possibilities: scholarships for children who had nowhere to turn, support for families struggling to survive, mentorship programs for those overlooked by society. She imagined herself walking through classrooms, community centers, and hospitals, offering not just financial support, but hope and encouragement, the very gifts her uncle had given her. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. One of the old estate staff, a kind-hearted housekeeper named Martha, stepped inside cautiously. She had served the Harrison family for decades and had always admired Anna's quiet strength. "Miss Anna," Martha said gently, "I just wanted to say, we all knew your uncle was fond of you. He always said you had a heart bigger than any fortune in this house. We're proud of you." Anna smiled through her tears. "Thank you, Martha. That means more to me than anything." The simplicity of the moment, the acknowledgement of her quiet endurance, grounded Anna. She realized that her inheritance was not merely for herself, it was a responsibility to honor her uncle's life and his values. That evening, as the sun set over the sprawling estate, Anna sat quietly in the library, the letter beside her. She reread Charles's words multiple times, committing them to memory. The calm and wisdom that had guided her uncle's life now flowed into her own. She understood that this was her purpose, to transform the wealth she had inherited into a force for good. Meanwhile, news of the will reading continued to dominate headlines. Reporters speculated endlessly about how Anna would use her inheritance, while her relatives fumed and schemed in vain, their anger and jealousy doing nothing but tarnishing their own reputations. Anna paid no attention to the noise. She knew her path. She knew the values her uncle had instilled in her, and she knew that his trust, expressed in that single heartfelt letter, was more valuable than all the money in the world. "This isn't about revenge," she whispered to herself. "It's about honor. It's about love. It's about making the world a little better, just as he did for me." And so, with the letter safely tucked in her pocket and her heart full of purpose, Anna began the first steps of her new life. Every decision, every plan, and every action would be guided by the words of the man who had loved her unconditionally. She was no longer invisible. She was no longer overlooked. She had inherited everything, not merely a fortune, but a mission, a legacy, and a chance to change the world. As she gazed out at the estate, the golden light of the setting sun reflecting on the windows and gardens, Anna felt an overwhelming sense of peace. The love and wisdom her uncle had given her would guide her forever. And in that quiet moment, she whispered one final promise: "I will honor you, Uncle Charles. I will live as you would have wanted me to, with kindness, courage, and a heart open to the world." The mansion, once a place of whispered resentment and forgotten voices, had now become the birthplace of something remarkable, the living legacy of Charles Harrison, carried forward by the niece he had always believed in. The weeks following Anna's inheritance were marked not by ostentation or spectacle, but by quiet, determined action. The Harrison mansion, once a monument to wealth hoarded and entitlement assumed, had begun to transform under her guidance. The golden chandeliers, marble floors, and priceless artwork were no longer symbols of privilege for the few. They had become the backdrop for generosity, opportunity, and hope. Anna had immediately established the Charles Harrison Foundation, an organization dedicated to empowering those who had been overlooked by society. The mission was clear: provide scholarships, mentorship, and resources for children, women, and families who had been forgotten. She drew from her own experiences, recalling the isolation she had once felt, the quiet humiliation of being ignored and undervalued. It was these memories that guided every decision she made. The first projects were small, but symbolic. A scholarship program for underprivileged students allowed bright, motivated children to pursue higher education. Anna personally visited schools, listening to the stories of students who struggled daily against circumstances they did not choose. She met a boy named Jamal, whose mother worked 3 jobs and whose father had abandoned the family. His dream was to become an engineer, but he feared tuition and living costs would make it impossible. "It's your determination that matters most," Anna told him, smiling. "The rest is just support, and that's what I'm here to give you." In that moment, she felt the same sense of purpose her uncle had instilled in her years ago. By lifting others, she honored his memory and ensured that his legacy would continue. Another initiative focused on women in business. Anna provided seed funding for female entrepreneurs, mentorship programs, and access to resources that had long been reserved for those with connections and capital. She met with women who had innovative ideas but lacked the means to realize them, listening intently, offering guidance, and investing in their futures. "You have the talent," she told one young woman developing a tech startup. "Now let's make sure the world can see it too." Her approach was consistent: empowerment over charity, mentorship over handouts. Every decision reflected the principles her uncle had left behind: compassion, integrity, and practical action. News outlets quickly picked up Anna's story. From the outset, the headlines framed her not as the heiress to a fortune, but as a heroine who had turned personal adversity into a force for good. Articles read, "From overlooked niece to philanthropic leader," and Anna Harrison, transforming a billion-dollar estate into hope for the forgotten. Social media amplified her efforts. Photos of Anna meeting students, visiting schools, and opening new programs went viral. Comments poured in, praising her humility, intelligence, and compassion. People across the world began donating to the foundation, inspired by her example. The narrative was clear. She had been chosen not just to inherit wealth, but to transform it into a meaningful legacy. Her relatives, however, were relegated to the background. Edward continued to nurse his anger, Monica sulked in her social circles, and Victor fumed online. Attempts to reclaim or challenge the inheritance were dismissed by the courts. Public perception increasingly sided with Anna. She had not sought vengeance, nor had she flaunted her wealth. She had acted with dignity and vision, leaving the entitled family members to grapple with the consequences of their greed. Anna's daily life evolved rapidly. She continued to manage the Harrison estate with precision, meeting with trustees, advisors, and staff to ensure that every decision honored her uncle's vision. She made it a priority to preserve the mansion as a symbol not just of wealth, but of purpose. Portions of it were converted into offices for the foundation, classrooms, and meeting spaces for community programs. Despite the demands of her new responsibilities, Anna never lost her humility. She maintained simple routines, walking through the gardens, reading letters from students and beneficiaries, and spending quiet evenings reflecting on her uncle's guidance. She had learned that true influence did not come from wealth alone, but from integrity, consistency, and the courage to act according to one's values. "This estate," she reflected one evening, looking out over the gardens bathed in sunset, "is not mine. It's ours, for everyone who has been ignored, overlooked, or underestimated." One of the most dramatic examples of Anna's impact came when she visited a rural school where children had previously struggled with basic supplies. She arrived in a modest car, wearing simple attire, but carrying bundles of books, laptops, and educational resources. Teachers and parents were overwhelmed with gratitude. The children, some of whom had never seen such tools, stared wide-eyed as Anna spoke. "I was once in your place," she said softly. "I know what it feels like to be overlooked. But remember this, the world will see your worth when you refuse to let it diminish your light. I'm here to make sure you have the tools to shine." By the end of the day, the school had transformed. Classrooms were stocked, programs were initiated, and the children left with the spark of hope ignited in their hearts. Anna knew that these small steps, multiplied across communities, could ripple into generational change. The Harrison family watched from a distance. Their wealth had been stripped not by malice, but by fairness, vision, and moral clarity. Edward, attempting to rebuild his business ventures, found that public opinion favored Anna. Monica, now struggling to maintain social connections, realized her superficial charm could not match Anna's genuine impact. Victor's online influence waned, his attempts to defame Anna failing spectacularly. Eventually, even they could not ignore the transformation Anna had brought about. Newspapers covered her initiatives. Television broadcasts showed her mentoring young women and students, and community leaders praised her leadership. Slowly, grudging respect replaced bitterness in some hearts. Anna's actions spoke louder than any argument or legal challenge could. Months later, the foundation celebrated its one-year anniversary. Anna had invited students, community leaders, and staff from the estate to a grand ceremony. She stood on a raised platform, overlooking the crowd, her face illuminated by the warm glow of the setting sun. Children who had once struggled to envision a future now stood proudly, sharing their accomplishments and dreams with an audience that could finally hear them. Anna reflected on her journey, from a girl ignored by her family, to the recipient of her uncle's love, to the woman leading a legacy that would change lives. The mansion, the fortune, and the title of heiress were not the pinnacle. It was the ability to uplift others that defined her true inheritance. "Wealth is fleeting," she said, addressing the audience but love, guidance, and opportunity, these are eternal. I inherited not just a fortune, but a responsibility. And together we can ensure that no one is left behind, ignored, or unseen." The crowd erupted in applause. Students hugged her, staff nodded in admiration, and even distant relatives could not help but recognize the magnitude of her achievements. In that moment, Anna's journey had come full circle. She had transformed her life, honored her uncle, and created a lasting impact on the world. Later that evening, Anna visited Charles Harrison's grave once more. The estate had quieted, the gardens serene, and the stars began to appear overhead. She knelt beside the headstone, placing a single white rose, a symbol of respect, love, and remembrance. "Thank you, Uncle," she whispered. "You believed in me when no one else did. I promise I will continue your legacy, not for wealth, but for the lives we can touch, the hope we can inspire, and the hearts we can uplift." As she rose, Anna felt an overwhelming sense of peace. She had inherited everything, not just the fortune, but the opportunity to create meaningful change. And in that, she realized the ultimate truth. True wealth is measured not by what you possess, but by the lives you transform and the legacy you leave behind.